From SBI's Executive Briefing Center in Dallas, Texas, the most watched and listened to content in B2B sales and marketing, it's the SBI Podcast.
Welcome to SBI TV, the weekly show dedicated to helping you make your number. On today's show, I have the pleasure of hosting members of the Right Star Alliance. This is a group founded by 3 firms that recognize together they offer more value to private equity firms than each of them by themselves. With me today are Brina Garrett, CEO of the Sustaina Group, and her partner Brian Jenkins. Sustaina is a firm focused on naming, branding, and positioning of B2B companies. Adrian Barrick, VP of Partnerships at OpFocus, a company dedicated to implementation of sales and marketing tech stacks, and SBI's own Ellen Wade, an engagement manager focused on driving revenue growth for PE-backed portfolio companies and equity value for PE firms. Today we'll be discussing corporate carve-outs and how flawless go-to-market execution in all areas is critical to realizing the investment thesis. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks for having us.
Glad that you could be here. So, Brina, I was on the other side of one of these with you, and I've seen a couple of them, but you've seen a whole lot of corporate carve-outs, and you've been involved in those. So, any perspective and words of wisdom for the audience on
Absolutely.
On corporate carve-outs?
Yes.
Go ahead.
So a carve-out is a unique situation, especially with regard to brand. So if you think about it, it's an entity that's being carved out of a larger business, and they either are nameless or they're using a line of business name that is not going to be externally facing or represent the value that the business has, in the potential value the business has. So one of the first things that a leadership team and a PE firm is usually focused on is we need to figure out the name. So having named 36 companies to date, there's an art and a science to that, and as you know, we've lived it.
Found out the hard way.
Yeah, well, that's another story, another time. Having named 36 companies to date, our methodology allows us to figure out the name quite quickly, develop the brand, develop the market positioning, and then determine the visual brand as well, because that's a very important point. The other thing that's interesting about carve-outs is the internal audience. So here you have a group of people that used to identify with the parent company. And so the brand also plays a huge internal function. They need a new flag to support, or a flag to salute. They need a rally cry. And establishing that new brand can be incredibly important. We did one of these last year. And the feedback from people when they see the new brand that they get to be a part of, incredibly important. And then if you think about it, all that has to cascade downstream.
So you talked about some of the early impact of brand and the naming on a carve-out, but what about some of the downstream things that it touches? What are their touch points?
Tell you what, I'm going to ask my partner Brian to answer that question.
Great, thanks, Brina. You know, when we're developing brands, there's no less than 15 different work streams happening at the same time, and that's all even within go-to-market. Everything from talent top grading to sales pitch messaging to sales playbooks, up to tech stack deployment, and even go-to-market plans. You know, they're all happening at the same time, and they're all linked back to brand and messaging. And with brand and messaging, consistency is absolutely critical and key. And they provide a platform for everything else to function from. So if some of those work streams are not communicating, you've got a major issue there, and none of them are operating optimally, right? And a lot of times, if they're not communicating, they'll have to be redone further down the line. We're going to have to go back in and do some QA testing just to see where the brand is embedded and where it's not. So it becomes a major issue. It
becomes another delay in the recognition of
right.
an investment thesis.
That's right.
All right. Ellen, some of the work streams that Brian brings up, I think you've managed and been responsible for delivering. What thoughts do you have?
Yeah, so one of the thoughts is around program management and the criticality of that. So Brian mentioned the cross-functional interlocks across all of these different areas of a business within a carve-out. And all of these are going to be new functions, really, for the company. They have to exist in a new format. So that program management and that cross-functional interlock across the different work streams is critically important. The second thing I would mention is communication. So communication, not just with the client, but also internally as an alliance. And what's what's important about that is that the brand message that Brina and Brian mentioned gets carried through to the field and through sales execution. If we don't see that, then typically it's very challenging to ensure that the brand is carried through all the deliverables and that things downstream like Salesforce automation are implemented effectively.
It's a good segue, right, to tech stack. Adrian, in a carve-out situation, and again, I'm relating to some of this. It's bringing back memories. But what are some of the impacts you see on a carve-out?
When we think about the go-to-market tech stack, it's sometimes an afterthought or not the number one priority in the wake of a carve-out. And it's understandable people are thinking about naming and brand and what the sales process is going to be. But what we found is with transitional service agreements, there's a limited window where we have access to the data and some of the other key pieces we need from the original company in order to build the tech stack effectively. So that combined with the fact that of all the work streams in the wake of a carve-out, tech is one of the most iterative. It doesn't need to be perfect right away. What we advise clients is, take the opportunity to build the foundation of tech and go to market, your CRM and your data, get that started. And we might not know the name or the exact sales process, the sales structure, the comp. These might still be outstanding questions. That's okay. We can get a foundation of go-to-market tech and data set up, and then close collaboration with the other work streams means we can just refine that later on.
It's great advice.
Yeah.
Thanks. All right, so one or two sentences on words of wisdom around executing a carve-out. Ellen, I'll start with you.
Yep, so here at SBI, we talk about sales success being 50% performance conditions and 50% talent. And particularly with carve-out situations, we often see sales leaders think that by just putting great talent in a new company, they will be successful. So I'd encourage everyone to consider the enablement component as it relates to sales effectiveness.
Okay. Brian, I'll go to you next.
Sure. Do it from the customer or end user's perspective. What are they looking for? What do they need that you can uniquely provide? Brand the benefit that'll help them. Don't do it for what's easier for the carve-out.
Okay. Adrian?
The tech is the iterative piece. Get a foundation built and refine it as you go.
Great. Brina, bring it home for us.
Yeah, that's that saying, if I'm a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I would advise, I'm going to repeat myself, don't forget the power of a brand, both externally and internally. If you don't have the people with you, the business is going to struggle. And to Brian's point about the consistency, incredibly important, because flowing through all those downstream work streams, if you will, that is going to have a huge material effect on the company's success and growth.
Great. I think the thing that I'd like to add to this is, and the input is great, and the Right Star philosophy and communication is great, but there are a lot of firms out there that will come in to advise on work streams, and they're great with finance work streams, they're great with IT work streams, but not a complete work stream for go-to-market and what you need to do in a carve-out situation. So I think everything that you brought up, this leads to a very cohesive kind of set of work streams for go-to-market that may not have existed historically for carve-out situations.
Yeah, we've seen it many times. Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks
Mike.
for having us. Appreciate it.
All right, that was a great show. Thank you for your time and insights, everybody, and we thank the SBI audience for tuning in. Thank you for your continued support. As always, until next time, I wish you good luck as you try and make your number.
This has been the SBI Podcast. For more information on the studio, SBI's Executive Briefing Center, our team, or to schedule a workshop, please visit salesbenchmarkindex.com.